Good morning, third grade. Today is Thursday, um, April 16th. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulties. Just a quick reminder before we start our lecture. We had a history test yesterday. Your parents should have the booklets. They picked them up from school, and I made copies of everything so that you'd have them at home. You can just take the tests right there and take a picture of them and send them over to me. If you don't have the booklets for whatever reason, just let me know and I will send them. The history test yesterday is technically due by Friday, and tomorrow we have a science test. The science test is on chapter 7, and that will cover everything about animals that we learned, vertebrates and invertebrates and mammals and reptiles and everything. And that test that you take tomorrow is due by Sunday. I'm pretty easy about these kinds of things. So as long as you or any parents listening are communicating, hey, I didn't have a chance to do this, or I don't have the test booklet. I'm not hard on actual due dates, but I do like to know that people are taking them. Anyways, I hope you guys are all doing well. So let's dive right in. So chapter 7 was about different kinds of animals. We talked about invertebrates and vertebrates, and we talked about mammals and amphibians and all of their characteristics, meaning what makes up the animal, what are they made of, what do they look like, what do they eat, how do they defend themselves. This chapter is about where animals live, and the word for that is habitats. And each animal needs a different habitat. You can't take penguins and throw them in the desert. You can't take a tiger and put them on the Great Plains. God has designed them for particular locations, and that's what we call their habitat. So, giraffes have really long necks, and surprise, surprise, they live in an area where the trees have all their leaves at the top. So we can say that a habitat is the natural home of a plant or an animal. There's water habitats, there's jungle habitats, there's snow habitats, but each animal is designed or suited to the habitat or environment that they live in. So, what does an animal need in a habitat? Four important things: space, shelter, water, and food. Now, if you see the panda bear there to the right, panda bears only eat a certain type of food, and that is bamboo. They won't eat anything else. So, if they are taken out of China and put in a zoo somewhere else, you gotta find bamboo shoots, because you can't just get them Taco Bell. They won't eat it. They need the food. They need access to water. They need shelter or a place that they raise their young. Sometimes we'll see shelter doesn't actually have to be like, a hole in a tree or something. Shelter can just mean a burrow in the ground, or sometimes even a group of animals that it lives in. Shelter can be thought of as protection. And then finally, animals need space. They need space to roam and reproduce. You can't take a bunch of animals like Zootopia and put them in a small city. They need their own designated area, their own area that's just for them, or else they won't be a thriving community of animals. So we're going to go through each one of these step by step, kind of see why they need each thing. And the first one is space. There's the birds. Now, some animals, like mice or hamsters, don't need much space, and they can live pretty crowded together. Other animals, like tigers, need miles and miles of their own territory, because tigers need a certain amount of food to eat every day, and so they have to have a lot of space so that animals can roam in and out. If there's too many tigers living on one spot, they'll fight each other because there won't be enough food for all of them to eat. So, different an animal like a tiger or a whale is going to need more space. It's going to move a lot more than something like a hamster or a gerbil or an ant. So depending on the animal, depends on their space. Um, if you if the animal does not have enough space, they will fight for it. If any of you have dogs and you take your dog for a walk, you notice that they mark a bunch of trees. They go a little bit of tinkle on them. And that's because they're marking their space. This is my territory. Now, they live in a house, so same rules don't apply, but all animals will mark out their territory, the space that they live in, and they try and protect that from other animals. So they need mates to have babies with, they need food and shelter and all the things we're going to talk about in their particular space. And if another animal tries to come and take it, well, then they have to stand up for what's theirs. Now, some animals can move for better space. We call this process migration, and that's movement when the seasons change. There's kind of a cool anecdote or story. When I was at Redeemer one time, some of you may remember this, I think it was last year, and there was a migration of butterflies across our school. Then there was just these hundreds of butterflies that were all flying in the same direction. Now, as we have learned, the earth rotates and changes, and that changes the weather. So, if you are a bird or a fish that is swimming around up north where it's cold during the summer, you might be able to live with that. But when the earth gets cold, you have to move down south or else you'll freeze to death. So that process is called migration. So some animals don't migrate at all. Some animals migrate, kind of short distances. And some animals migrate all across the globe, especially birds. That way, they can always have enough space, enough territory for them to live in. So, during the summer months, they fly up to the North Pole, not the northern regions or the southern regions where it's cold, and they eat all the food. Then when it gets cold, they fly back to the warmer temperatures and eat all the food there. And so they can move from place to place. Birds move in large groups called a flock. You can see there's a flock of pigeons. They do that for protection. If there was an eagle or a hawk flying around, by flying a lot of birds together, it makes it hard for the hunter, for the predator, to pick out just one. So there's safety in numbers. If there was just one lone pigeon flying across the sky, the hawk would be able to catch it really easily. By moving in a lot of numbers, when the hawk comes, they can kind of spread everywhere and confuse the hunter. So some animals move in large groups for protection. In birds, we call this group a flock. In land animals, we will see it's called a herd. And in fish, it's called a shoal. All right, next slide. Shelter. Animals need a place for protection. Now, some animals create a home to live in. Beavers create a lodge, and it's a whole building that they make out of wood. And there's underwater entrances, and they build dams. Most animals do not go to such great lengths. Some animals, like squirrels, you see just there, those cute little squirrels, they find a hole or a hollow in a tree, and that's where they gather their nuts and have their babies. Some animals will create shelter by digging holes in the ground, but not every animal can do that. Let's say you're a herd of water buffalo. Well, water buffalo don't dig. Water buffalo can't chew down trees, so they move together in a large group called a herd, like we were just talking about. And then that provides them shelter. because if, like you say, a lion comes to attack them, the water buffalo will all group together and point their horns out towards the attacking lions, and try to protect the members of the herd. Shelter means protection. So, whether you're like a gopher and your shelter is underground, so when some that predator comes to get you, you shelter underground, or if you're like a water buffalo or a cow, you shelter together in large groups. Animals need a place for protection because we talked about predator and prey in the last chapter. Predator are animals that hunt other animals, and prey are the animals that are hunted. And the time an animal is most vulnerable is when they are a baby or when they are giving birth. And so they need a place to be protected when they do those things. Also, a shelter can be used to rest. Animals sleep. Maybe not as much as humans all the time. Some cats sleep way more than humans, but they need a safe place to sleep. And some animals sleep for a long period of time. We call this hibernation. You probably have seen this in movies or on TV or heard about it from your parents. Animals that live in really cold weather, really cold habitats, will sleep through kind of the worst parts of the winter. Living in LA, we don't get hard winters. They're pretty easy. But if you live in Alaska, those winters can get cold, 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 cold. As humans, we have built houses and we can snuggle up in our houses. But if you're an animal, well, you don't have that luxury. And so some animals will go to sleep for 2 or 3 months. And we call that hibernation. And while it's super cold outside, they just go into a deep, deep, deep sleep. And sleep for 2 or 3 months. When they get up, it's spring and it's warm again. All right, water. Now, there's 2 aspects of water for a habitat. Sometimes water is the habitat, like fish and whales and dolphins that live inside the water, but also water is important for animals. Every living thing on planet Earth uses water, whether it drinks it like us or lives in it like fish. Every animal is based on water, and so we all need water to survive. All living things need water. Now, some animals live in a habitat where they don't get a whole lot of water. If you're a lizard or some other animal living in the desert, well, we know that it doesn't rain a lot in the desert, but even they get water. They get water from dew. Dew is the moisture that condenses on plants and other things when it's cold at night. Have any of you ever walked outside in the morning as you're going to school and you see your mommy or daddy's car is covered in like little water droplets? It didn't rain last night. When the temperature got cold the night before, the moisture in the air condenses or attracts to one particular spot. And so if you're a mouse or some animal living in the desert, you're not getting the rain, but you can drink the dew in the morning. And that's how you get your water. Like we said, some animals live in the water. That is their habitat. There are 2 types of water habitat, and this will be on your test. There is freshwater habitats and saltwater habitats. Freshwater habitats are lakes, ponds, and rivers. You shouldn't drink water out in the wild, but humans can drink water from ponds, lakes, and streams because it doesn't have any salt in it. Nobody should ever drink water from the ocean. First of all, it's gross. But it has a type of salt called sodium chloride in the water. If you've ever been to the beach and you get some water in your mouth and it kind of tastes all salty and gross, that's because there's all these minerals from all of the time that the that the world has been created inside the ocean, and so we call it salt water. If you take a goldfish and throw it in the ocean, it will not survive because goldfish are freshwater fish. If you take an anchovy and throw it in a glass of water that you have at your house, it will not survive because it is a saltwater fish. So if a fish lives in the ocean, it is a saltwater habitat. If it lives in the river, then it has a freshwater habitat. Now there are certain exceptions to this rule, like salmon live some of their life in freshwater and some of their life in saltwater, but normally it's one or the other. Either you're a clownfish like Finding Nemo and you live in the ocean, or you're a trout and you live in a lake. Alright, lastly, almost done, you guys have been brave to stick around. We have food. That's a sick looking leopard. Every animal needs food. Now, Mother Nature, God, will find a way to balance a habitat. If there are too many of one animal, that habitat is not balanced. There needs to be the right number of each animal. So, if there were not predators, then the animals, like, mice, would just reproduce so fast that there would be too many mice to have enough food, and some of the mice would start to starve. So that's why you have cats. And cats eat some of the mice and keep the habitat balanced. If you ever saw that movie Lion King, The Circle of Life, every animal needs food in their habitat. So you have the herbivores that we talked about that eat the plants, and the predators, or the carnivores, eat the herbivores. And by the herbivores eating the plants, the habitat doesn't get too overgrown with, leaves and grass and stuff. They keep the plants in control, and then the carnivores eat the herbivores and make sure that they don't overpopulate, and the whole habitat is balanced, if that made any sense. So you probably have heard of the next word. It is the food chain. And I kind of just talked about it for a second. It is the transfer of energy from one living thing to another for survival. So we eat food to get energy. Some of us might eat it because it tastes good, but that's how you get energy to run around and move around, is by eating food. So whether it is Taco Bell or a yummy salad, when you eat that food, the energy goes from the food into your body, and that's how you keep on going. That's why we got to eat every day. So the plant, some grass, grows up from the ground, and it's taking the energy from the sun and using it to grow. Then a cow comes and eats the grass, and it takes the energy from the grass and uses it to grow. And then a lion eats the cow and takes the energy from the cow to grow. And then the lion gets old and dies, and it gets absorbed into the earth, and its energy goes back into the ground where it's absorbed by the grass, and the grass uses that energy to grow. That's the food chain. That was a very simple explanation, but there can be many levels, right? The bug eats the leaf piece, and then the grasshopper eats the thing, and then there can be many levels in the food chain, but it's this idea that all of the energy is being transferred around as each animal eats the food that it is designed to eat. So we talked about last chapter how carnivores' teeth are sharp. A tiger can't survive off of grass. It has to eat meat. So it needs to get its energy from something other than mango trees. And it does that by catching and eating prey. And that is the food. So the four things that every animal needs in its habitat is space, It needs room to move and enough territory to survive. It needs shelter, some place for protection, whether that is like in an actual like hole in the ground or just amongst its peers in a herd. It needs water to drink or sometimes to live in, and it needs food to eat. So, all animals and all the habitats that we're going to talk about have these things. If Judy got a hamster for her birthday, and we got a little hamster cage, and we couldn't get a teeny tiny, we can't just put it in a hamster ball because that's not enough space. It needs more room than that, so we got kind of a big cage. Then we bought a little kind of house for it in its cage for shelter. That's where it goes to sleep at night. She named it S'more. It's a cute little dwarf hamster. We put a little water bottle up, and it drinks the water out of the water bottle. And we put food in every day because the hamster needs food. And Judy's little cage inside of her room is a perfect habitat for this teeny tiny little hamster. It's not too big, it's not too little, has food and water, shelter, everything that an animal needs. All right, that's today's lecture. Thanks for watching. I know, it's not always easy just listening to my voice and watching these pictures, but I appreciate you doing it. I hope you guys are all doing well. I miss you, and I can't wait till this is all over. Remember, wash your hands and stay safe. I know you guys are all getting cabin fever. Be good for your parents. I know you will. You're awesome little people, and we're all going to get through this, and I'll see you on the side. I'm praying for you. See you soon. Bye.